Today we'll be taking a look at the 4th generation Briggs Altima toilet, introduced around circa 2006 and made up until either circa 2013 or 14. I definitely think that this generation shows that they were basically out of ideals, and you can easily tell considering it's a generic front flusher. Like we already didn't have a front flusher generation before that. Now, funny enough, the Briggs version of this generation of Altima is a lot more rarer. You've probably seen this under the Proflo branding, as with this particular example right here. Well, the Proflo versions were not really called anything, it was just model codes. So this technically was not called an Altima, but it's basically the same thing. Since it's the same thing, I'm reviewing both of those toilets. So let's take a look at this toilet and see what it has to offer. And spoiler alerts, it's pretty bad. The overall design of this toilet is pretty bland. Not much to talk about here at all. It is painfully bland. The trapway opening looks like that. It's just a standard lip opening. Not much to talk about here. The tank parts are pretty interesting. This is a 2000s toilet that still uses a ball cock fill valve, as most companies move towards fluid master fill valves, which is interesting. And of course you also got the handle and flapper and base. Tank parts are pretty simplistic, but they seem to work fine, and can be interchanged too. Let's have a look at a flush. Pretty unremarkable. The pulling and siphon power of this toilet is pretty mixed, as with most front flushers. Far from the worst, but not the best either. As long as it has a pretty long flush, it should get things down, but there may be some hiccups here or there, as with most front flushers, so yeah, not that great. The performance is quite bad, which should not be very surprising. It's a front flusher after all. Again, the biggest problem is the openings, especially on standard height versions, which look a lot more smaller. The trapway passages look pretty standard and generic, but the openings are the biggest problem. So that shouldn't be very surprising. Let's have a look at bollards now. Probably hard to see, but it sucks. Generally speaking, the Proflo versions tend to have worse quality control of most Briggs models that are rebatched by them, but I wouldn't be surprised if the bollards is still this crappy on the Briggs versions. Yeah, it's terrible. There are so many gaps missed. And of course, adding in the deep bow, that also doesn't help out either. It sucks. And that's the 4th generation Briggs or Proflo Altima toilets. Pretty predictable bad front flushers. Again, Briggs just running out of ideals and making the most generic thing possible, and unsurprisingly, it's pretty bad. Big shock. But let's put this toilet into the grading scale. Let's grade it. The overall design of this toilet doesn't look much different compared to the 3rd generation. It looks kind of cheap and generic, and I don't really care for it. I give it a 4. I find it interesting how they still use ball cock fill valves instead of the regular fill valves like Fluid Master, given that most companies have moved on to something like that. But here, that really isn't the case. They're still using ball cocks, which is interesting. Frankly, the tank parts are very simplistic, but they can be interchanged. Thankfully, nothing proprietary, which I do like. Personally, though, I kind of prefer regular fill valves instead of ball cocks. But still, the parts are very simplistic. I give it a 6. Wow, a front flusher with bad quality control? I totally haven't seen that before. Yep, the usual problems are here. Inconsistent performances, bad quality rim jets, you name it. Thankfully, these things don't have any issues flushing out, but still, quality control really is not good at all. It gets a 4. Generic trapway passages, but with a slope up and a questionable trapway opening. That's a 4 if I've ever saw one. If you've seen a front flusher, you know how they flush. This toilet really isn't much different. While I've definitely seen worse front flusher flushes, and at least this one has some power, the flush is pretty run-of-the-mill, so I'm giving it a 5. The pulling and siphon power on this toilet is pretty mixed. Basically, you want to have a pretty long flush in order to get a long pulling and siphon power. Otherwise, if it's too short, it obviously isn't going to do too good. You may want to use most of the water in the tank if I'm being completely honest. Overall though, it's a 5. Yep, the performance is bad. I don't think that really should be very surprising. Generally speaking, I definitely think it's because of the opening, but sometimes the slope up could also cause some issues too. But still, the performance is not very good at all. Not very shocking, honestly. It's getting a 4. I know Barnes's on front flushers are pretty crappy, but man, this one kind of sucks. There seems to be barely any coverage at all, which is kind of pitiful. It seems like some of the jets are not working, and or they just don't function well at all. Again, that's typical for front flushers, but man, this one's a worse case. It's getting a 2, it sucks. Like most front flushers, survivability is not very good at all. You shouldn't be surprised why that is. It's getting a 4. Now let's talk about the overall value of these toilets. Yep, it's a pretty predictable bad front flusher. Predictable qualities, predictable flushes, predictable performances, even more spoilers than I was expecting, but outside of that, it's just a bad front flusher. This is basically Briggs and Proflo running out of ideals and saying, hey, let's make a front flusher again. Even though Briggs already did that with their second generations, and I definitely think it was a lot better compared to this one. Yeah, I really don't have much to say about this. It's just really bad. And that really shouldn't be very surprising, honestly. It's just another run-of-the-mill generic front flusher. That's why I'm giving it a 4 in value. The final score of the 4th generation Briggs Altima toilets, as well as the Proflo front flushers with their many different model codes, is a 42 out of 100. I really don't have much to say about these. They are pretty forgettable and pretty run-of-the-mill bad front flushers. No wonder why a lot of people don't care about these.